Well, first of all, welcome. What I'm going to be doing with you today is storytelling around this issue of how we can, what can we do with ourselves internally, beginning self first, as Sister Jenna and Sister Verona so articulately and eloquently expressed before. What can we do with ourselves to create intergenerational healing, oneness amongst ourselves, for our communities, and for the world, which is very much in keeping with African conceptualizations of taking a whole village to raise a child, and also with the principle of Ubuntu, which translates as I am because you are, and I am because we are, sorry, and we are because I am. It speaks to the unity of the universe coming from the source, which is one. So I'm going to begin by pouring libation in the spirit and in the name of my ancestors, which is an activation of my own genetic potential, bearing in mind that the physical nerves are connected through the ley lines and the galactic synapses with the spiritual nerves of the universe, if you like. So I call upon my ancestors. I'm really calling upon me, the me that I was, the me that I am, and the me that I will be. So I call upon Baba Adisa Adebi. I call upon Baba Adesose Wallace. I call upon Iyagba Dediro. And I call upon all of the ancestors, those who vibrate at a positive, loving, light level. And also include in my call forgiveness for those who may have committed crimes and indiscretions out of their identification with greed, lust, and with identifications with jealousy, envy, and that which the Christian faith calls the 7 deadly sins. And those sins are deadly because they keep us from being ourselves. And as long as we are not ourselves, we have to ask the question, are we truly living if we are not ourselves? So I'm going to begin with a drum beat, continuing in this sense of invocation. Then I'm going to tell you a story, and then we'll engage in different ways. So first of all, let me begin. Let me know if you can hear the drum beat. Excellent. So when I say Ibaye, it means respect. And if I say Ibaye, you also repeat it, but repeat it on mute so that it does not become a cacophony. So Ibaye, Ibaye. I'm going to adjust the screen to make sure you can see the top of my head when I stand. Can you see the top of my head? Excellent. So, I begin all stories in this way. I often say, in a place far from here, but near to there. So when I say, in a place far from here, I would like you to unmute and say, but near to there. So, in a place far from here,
but near to here.
I said, in a place far from here.
But near to here.
Near to there.
Near to there.
I said, in a place far from here.
But near to there.
Tanaka wandered the dust bowl. This story is called the Golden Seed. Tanaka wandered the dust bowl of his land, Ire, looking for dried out yams and withered cassava in order to feed his starving children. You see, they suffered from that disease of luck known as kwashiako because Ire was a dust bowl. It had not always been that way. You see, in the long ago times, Ire was a fecund and fertile place, fields filled with gold and corn, silver rivers winding through the land. The harbor of Ire was always docked with many ships from distant lands, hoping to sample the wealth of Ire. The people of Ire were well known for their spiritual advancements and their evolution, and people came also to sample their wisdom, and all was well in Ire until the coming of those that the people of Ire universally called the evil ones. The evil ones came 3 times with war, blood and war, but the people of Ire were masterful warriors and repelled them back into the sea 3 times. The 3rd time, though, it is said that the evil ones in their distant lands slaughtered 1,000 people until the rivers of their own land ran red with blood. And with this sacrifice came again with a dark and malevolent sorcery. And Tanaka still remembered that time when he was a little boy, when the head sorcerer of the evil ones pointed up to a dark roiling cloud descending upon the land and said, "If we cannot have your bodies for our minds, your bodies will weaken, and we cannot have your fields, then you shall have them neither. Behold your end. Behold your doom. Behold the doom." And as he said this cloud landed upon the ground, seeped into the earth, destroyed all the crops and caused them to wither away, dried up the rivers in the riverbed, dried up the water in the riverbed, and weakened the warrior limbs on contact. Yes, it's true that the head of that sorcerer was removed with a swift sword stroke, but Ire remained a dust bowl. And years later, Tanaka wandered his land, looking for dried out yams to feed his beleaguered family. Tanaka had a child, a daughter whose name was Imani. And Imani was an eternal optimist. When she received these dried out fibrous roots, she always showed gratitude. She was loved by everyone. More importantly, she loved everyone. And she decided that she was going to end Ire's plight. The very next day, she set off along a dried out riverbed. Now, the people of Ire had a special quality. All of them could smell water. And so she walked along. And as she walked along, she would stop and she would dig and she would drink. So let's all dig and drink together. She would dig and she would drink. And then she would continue. Then she would stop and she would dig and she would drink. Now I can't see everybody, but I want to see some digging and drinking. So I can see some. Aha, now I can see some digging and drinking. Thank you very much. So she continued along the riverbed and she came to a point, a crossroads. And in the middle of this crossroads, she began to cross a confluence, but it seemed like a crossroads in the riverbed. And she began to dig, intending to drink. But as she dug, she smelt something strange, smoky, spicy. The aroma of something she had never smelled before. And she dug deeper until her hand closed on something hard. And she lifted it out and looked, and in her palm, she had a seed that glowed with a strange golden inner light. And she closed her hand on this seed. And as soon as she closed her hand, she was somewhere completely different. She could see along a green corridor, tree-lined corridor, that a beautiful meadow. And at the end of this meadow was a waterfall, a silvery curtain of water. And she walked towards this waterfall and in under the waterfall into a cavern, a circular cavern behind the waterfall. And in the center of this circular cavern was a raised dais. And upon this raised dais, a figure was slowly materializing. It was a dark, ebony black man wearing a white conical hat with a long white beard. And this figure was levitating above the dais. Imani looked in amazement, and the figure spoke. It said, "Imani, what is that you have in your hand?" And Imani said, "Oh, Father, I have a golden seed." "Then let me see it." And as he held out his hand, the seed flew from Imani's hand into his own hand. And he closed his hand upon this, and he began to speak to the seed and listen to the seed. And then it flew back to Imani's hand. And the older man said, "Why then do you come?" "I seek the salvation of Ire, oh Father." "Then what you have in your hand is the salvation of Ire, young one. What you must do is take this seed and plant it in the center of your sacred grove in Ire. Once you have done this, you must speak this word, and the word is Ejopelumio. Can you all say that?
Ejopelumio.
Okay, anytime you hear me say Ejopelumio, unmute and repeat Ejopelumio. So let's just try again one more time. Ejopelumio.
Ejopelumio.
Excellent. And the elder man said, "You must not give in to fear, but first let me tell you this. The head sorcerer of the ones you call the evil ones was given the spell that created the dirt fume by my twin brother, who is alike me in every respect, except that where I cleave to the light, he cleaves to the darkness. And he will either come for you or he will send somebody for you. Do not give in to fear. Whenever you are overcome by fear or overwhelmed, hold the seed tightly. Say the magic word, Ejo Pelumio.
Ejo Pelumio.
Romeo.
Hey, don't sleep, oh. Don't let me catch you napping. So, say the magic word. And when you say the magic word, say it with all the love that you can muster in your hearts. You must not give in. Imani did not really like the sound of somebody as powerful as a man that could levitate and cause magic words and speak to seeds coming for her. And yet, she girded her loins, found love in her heart, and said, yes, oh Father, I will do so. Then go that way. And Imani saw a tunnel leading out of the cave, and she began to walk that way. And as she walked, she saw light at the end of the tunnel, and with her heart gladdened, began to move more quickly. But as she moved, she heard a sound behind her. It was a kind of roaring sound, and a slithering sound. So she began to run, and as she ran, the sound grew louder. So she ran and she burst out into the sunlight and turned round to face whatever was coming behind her. And a slug-like figure reared up behind her, growling, electricity sheathing his body in unwholesome blue light. And this slug-like creature was at least 18 foot tall, with short, stubby arms and a circular mouth filled with razor-sharp fangs, stubby hands but claws like knives at the end. And this figure pointed at the golden seed and said to Imani, "Mine! Give it to me!" And Imani, holding the seed, said, "No." "Then die!" And as the creature said this, it shot a sizzling swathe of electricity towards Imani. And Imani held the golden seed and she cried, "Ejo Pelumio!
Ejo Pelumio!
She was in water, a whirlpool, and as she stood in this whirlpool, she sank and began to spin and spin. And so she was being drawn under the whirlpool. And as she was drawn under, she held up her hand, found love in her heart, and said, "Ejo Pelumio! She was back on her own land, Ire. Before the dirt fume, the land was green for cones. It seemed beautiful, and when she looked into the sky, she saw, to her horror, a dark, roiling cloud, and knew instinctively that this was the dirt fume. Now the people of Ire, especially the children, had grown up with the fear of the dirt fume in their very cells. They had been told by their parents and their grandparents time and time again that the dirt fume was an evil and terrible thing. And they could see the results of the dirt fume all around them. So when she looked up and saw the dirt fume, fear entered her heart. Further worsened when she saw the dirt fume diving towards her, it seemed, and within this cloud she could perceive imps with sharp knives and sharp teeth, and they were pointing at her and laughing as they dived towards her and they landed upon her and began to cut and rend her flesh, and she screamed in pain and fear. Ah! 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 And she began to give in to a fear that overwhelmed her in a way that she had never experienced. And the seed suddenly glowed warm in her hand. And as it glowed warm in her hand, she remembered all the things that she loved about life. She saw her father, she saw her mother, she saw the people of Iraq, and she closed her hand upon the seed, and she invoked the love in her heart with the magic word,
Palumio.
She was back in Iraq at her own time, the Dust Bowl of Iraq, and she heard the sound, Imani! It was her father, Tanaka. He came running up. He said, Imani, we have been looking for you for days. Where have you been? Father, don't worry. I have in my hand the salvation of Iraq, this golden seed. And she related what the elder had told her in the cave and said, we just need to go to the sacred grove, and we need to plant this seed in the center of the sacred grove, and all will be well. They had tried everything else. When they heard this, they rushed to the center of the sacred grove. They called all the elders and the intermediates and the young ones, and they gathered in a circle around Imani. And Imani took this seed and she bent and she planted it in the ground. And as she planted it, she stood over it and she said the magic word, except, given her tribulations, this time she said it like this, Excellent. And as she said this, a dark excrescence began to seep from the ground and lift from the ground, hovering about shoulder height. And she perceived within this dark cloud a lank, cadaverous figure pointing at her, rage on its face, and a clean, fresh wind blew from the west. And as it blew, it dissipated the figure, and all that she could hear was a lingering no. The dirt fume dissipated, and as it dissipated, shoots began to pop out of the ground and grew into strong, firm plants. And as they grew, the rivers were suddenly filled again with sweet waters, the fields filled with golden corn, trees laden with fruits. The land of Tyre was no longer a dust bowl. And so, Imani, which in Swahili means faith, restored the land of Ire, or so the old ones say. The end. So that is the end of the story. And what I am going to speak with you about is that the story has some motifs in it. So naturally there is faith, which is the evidence of things not looked for, the substance of things not seen. And I quote the Bible on that because I love that definition, but not because I actually am a Christian, but I do love that definition. And Ire means wellness. It's Yoruba for wellness, health. all of the things that wellness incorporates, such as wealth and good vibes and happiness and all of those things. And the key thing that the key instruction that Imani was given was, do not give in to fear. And this is because fear, as we now know neurologically, causes a discombobulation, a disruption of the hormones that allow us to be at peace, of the electrical impulses of our bodies that allow us to find equanimity within ourselves. Fear can give way to anger, or as we know, the fight, flight, fright reflex can cause us to fight, can cause us to run away, can cause us to freeze. But most importantly, it does not allow us to respond with love, unless we choose love. Now, the fear overwhelms our hearts and causes us to think with our heads. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the heart is in itself a brain, or like a brain, in the sense that it has neurons, that it can send messages, that it can influence the body, that it has an influence over the hormones and the nerves of the body. And that when we operate from the heart, this allows us to override the messages of the brain and tune in to our feelings and adapt to our feelings, as well as project feelings. And the heart responds to the feelings that fall under the banner of love. So gratitude, appreciation, approval, forgiveness, and I could go on, and I'm sure you could also go on with the kind of things that relate to love. This is important for us because we have been taught things such as, oh well, it's good for you to have to expunge your anger by really giving into it for a moment and then feeling better afterwards. But actually, neurological science shows that that damages our immune system, and that any anger does this. So that in fact, choosing to be angry is a choice against your own wellness and against your own connection with source. Choosing instead to be in love with oneself allows us to connect with source. But how do we do this? I mean, it's very easy to say, choose love instead. But sometimes we feel justified if we are, for example, if I, now speak from the I, if I am racially abused by somebody driving past in a car, shouting racially abusive words, and then skidding up, it's easy for me to feel justified that in my anger, that how dare they say such a thing which is hurtful? How could they? And I can feel angry, and I can go and tell somebody. I can go and find Shirley Peters and say, Madame Shirley Peters, do you know what such and such a person said to me? And blah, blah, blah. And Shirley Peters can join me in my anger. And then she can go and speak to Dave B, who will then speak to Nina. And all of us will be angry and feel justified in our angry reaction to this act. Now, we can also choose something else. And I'm just going to ask you to accompany me in choosing something else. And it's quite simple the way that we do this, because our heart, as I said, is a brain, and our heart can override our mind and therefore cause the secretions of dopamine, serotonin, the hormone melatonin, the hormones that some people call happy hormones or peace hormones. The heart has this capacity, and it's often overlooked. We speak of the heart metaphorically often. We often say, speak from the heart. But unless we know how to connect with the heart, that often means vague things like speak as truly as you can, and try to feel love without actually taking into consideration the physical heart in our physical bodies. So what I'm going to ask you to do, let me move so you can see what I'm doing, is to put your hand in the region of your heart. And we have an amazing gift from the source. We have our brains, we have our hearts, we have our solar plexus, we have all these things that in India they call chakras. We call them energy gates in the martial arts that I use. But nevertheless, we have all these things. And we also have our breath. And our breath is our spirit. It's the spirit that enters our body when we are born, because we are born with a in-breath, and when we die, we out-breath. And the spirit leaves the body on the wings of the breath. So we breathe into our hearts consciously. We're blessed with imagination, so we can easily imagine that our breath is going into our chest and into our hearts. And when we do this, what I'm going to ask you to do is to close your eyes for a moment, breathe in through your nose and out through your nose with your hand on your heart, and remember a time when you felt really thankful for something. And feel that feeling of gratitude in your heart. Remember too when you really appreciated something. Feel that sense of appreciation in your heart. Carried on the wings of your breath into your heart. And just dwell there for a moment. Feeling those sensations of gratitude and appreciation. And this is something that we can do anytime. It's actually a practice that I would strongly suggest that you do often, so that you can also do it when you're feeling overwhelmed, and not wait till you're overwhelmed before you practice it, because then it becomes inaccessible often. If you're interested, there is an organization in the United States called the Institute of Heart Math. And they have a whole range of practices that will enable you to access your heart and can seriously transform your life and your responses to the stresses of life. So I'm not going to explore this in depth because we don't have much time. So what I would like to do now is just hear from you briefly before we move on to something else about, let me also mention before I do that the term courage, by the way, which is the antidote to fear, is a heart's principle. The word core in Latin means heart. In Old French and even modern day French, cœur means heart. Courage means of the heart. So courage comes from the heart. It's not the same as Rambo, if you remember Rambo, or any of those people who have no fear. Courage is experiencing the fear and transforming it, doing it anyway, transforming it into something else, because we're human. We're like resonating chambers. We pick up all vibrations, including the negative ones, but we also have the ability to resonate according to the frequency that we decide by tuning in to our hearts. And having courage, and the practice I just showed you, is one of the ways of doing so. And it can take us from moments of anger to moments of peace by focusing on those things, those experiences we've already had. Just like Ure was fecund before the dirt flew and became fecund after the courage and the magic word. Actually, that magic word just means simply come dance with me, because dancing is an act of joy. So the principle of joy, the principle of gratitude, remember Imani was very thankful for dried out, withered yams. So even in circumstances when it feels as if there is no reason to be thankful, gratitude is still transformative. As Sister Jenna said, that I paraphrase to say that what we don't have is what we didn't give. What we don't have is what we did not give. Service enables us to have an encyclopedia, a dictionary, a history of gratitude and appreciation that we can call upon in order to neutralize the negative emotions. So I'm just wanting to find out what you're making of this thus far. So remembering that we're talking about how can we find within ourselves the facility to be able to generate oneness and connection intergenerationally for the oneness of all. So I just want to
and Sola,
that.
just to check in, because of the technical difficulties, we only have about 5 minutes left in the group.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you for that. In that case, let me continue to speak, because then when we get into the bigger room, then you can come with that. So I'll give you my take. We are already one. Our children, our us, are us, just as our ancestors are us. We have always had the capacity to tune in to the truth, because the truth is unchanging. It's always there. So if we learn to slow down what the Shaolin call the monkey mind, if we learn to quiet the monkey mind, that chattering mind that's always continuing to chat, and we learn to dwell in the heart, which has always seemed metaphorical, but as we know in these times, and as we've always known in ancient times, it has always been possible to connect through the heart. So what I want to leave you with is the notion that freedom, true freedom, is actually a choice. We as Africans have been enslaved, colonized, and even Europeans have been enslaved and colonized, because although it was a long time ago, the Roman Empire did to Europe what Europe did to Africa, because the Celts were the people who occupied Europe a long time ago, and they were completely destroyed, apart from a few in different places. And anger, revenge begets revenge, war begets war. Notions such as peacekeeping forces are ridiculous, because you can't create peace with force. You can only create peace by tuning in to peace, resonating with it. A clock, those old grandfather clocks, which I'm sure that some of you remember, have pendulums. And it has been shown that pendulums, the strongest pendulum in a room full of pendulums, entrains the others so that all of them start to move with the same rhythm as the strongest pendulum. And that is what our heart does in our body, so that we entrain all the rest of our organs by tuning in to the love in our heart. And gratitude and appreciation are two ways which are much more easy to access in the moment than love. Love can sometimes be difficult if we're feeling offended or aggressed upon. But I'll leave you with this, these two concepts. How do they trap monkeys in Asia? They put food in a coconut, they put a hole in the coconut, the monkey puts its hand in the coconut, the hunter comes along, finds a monkey with his hand in the coconut, because the monkey cannot let the food go and just go away. It holds on to the food, just as we hold on to feelings of envy, jealousy, and self-righteousness and our desire for revenge. Also, how do they train elephants? Well, they tie the elephant's foot to a post, the baby elephant's foot to a post. It can't get away though it tries to, because it's a free animal. And it walks in a circle and walks in a circle. When it's older, they tie it to a bigger post. When it's older, like our adolescents, the equivalent, they don't even need to tie it to the post again. It just continues to walk in a circle because its mind is entrained. So we can train our own minds through our heart and become seriously free, truly free. So thank you for listening to the story of Tanaka and, more importantly, Imani. Recognize that all the figures in the story were actually you, all of them. The evil ones and the beautiful ones, they are all us. So it's possible to create oneness with our younger generations because they are us.
Thank you very much.
Nice.
Stella.
Thank you, thank you,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Beautiful.
Thank
Well
you.
done. Excellent. Thank you.
Lovely.
Lovely.